You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Betoota Advocate, on Desert Rock FM.
Welcome back to the Betoota Advocate radio show. You're joined by Clancy Overall and Effie Bateman. And today's guest is one we're excited to have on the show because he's telling a story that I guess holds a place in all of our hearts as Queenslanders. It's a story that will probably be told for 100 years, maybe more. The story of Wayne Bennett. And, you know, it's been told before, and I'll get into that in a second, but this is an interesting way, and I feel like we've kind of got it, what would you call it? In the music industry, you'd say unplugged. You know, this is unplugged. Andrew Webster, thank you for joining us. Thank you for telling the story, and thank you for sharing your experiences with us on the Betoota Advocate radio show.
Thank you. What an honour to be here. Been a big admirer of your work for a long time.
Thank you, mate. Thank you.
I started my career at the Coffs Harbour Advocate. No relation,
right.
no?
No relation. And, you know, people say that as well about our rugby league team, the Betoota Dolphins, but there's no relation there either. We'd love to be a feeder club for the NRL, but it tends to go the other way around. The players come back to Betoota.
I notice rugby league has a lot of material for you guys to work with.
And you, mate. And you.
Oh, thank you.
And you get a lot of work too, I guess. It's an interesting game. It's an interesting part of the Australian psyche. And a lot of people, and even Victorians who, you know, will dyed in the wool, will not acknowledge its existence, know the names of the people that they wish they didn't. They know the Willie Masons. They know the Wayne Bennett. And that's the big one I want to talk about. He's obviously going to be remembered as, I don't know what the equivalent is in America or in British sport or elsewhere in the world, but he's got this kind of folklore around him now where it's going to be hard to see anyone surpass that. I don't think we will. We won't.
No. Well, this year he coached his 900th first grade game. So, like, Wayne's turned 73 on the 1st of January this year, and I don't think he's shown any sign that he wants to stop. Yeah. You know, I think it just drives him so much. I think, and that was the interesting theme that I got out of the book, is that he is part. There's the coach and there's the man, and the longer time goes, the more he's wrapped up in his own mythology and his own legend as a coach. But what he did with the Dolphins this year and all these successes over the last few years just shows you he's not ageing at all.
So the wolf you feed, it comes from the famous old yarn. Your book's titled The Wolf You Feed, and it comes from the, I guess you'd say, Cherokee kind of oral history of there's two wolves inside you, one's evil, one's good. The one that you feed will thrive. Is that what we're talking about here? The mythology and the ego is the evil, and the coach and the gentleman is the good.
I think it's more the fact that, and the reason why I use it is, one, he uses it all the time, and he uses it both with his players and in terms of public speaking, all the time, and more often. That's what he told me. But it was interesting that both former players and members of his family and others said to me, read that parable because that sums him up. And one's a coach and one's the man, and he feeds the coach more and more because it feeds his ego, and that's the thing that's shining through.
But in the world of sport, is an ego pivotal to success?
100%.
Yeah,
like that's the thing. He has to be that type of coach. Otherwise, you tell me a coach that doesn't have an ego, that isn't selfish, that isn't prepared to tread on toes, that isn't prepared to burn players, burn officials to get what he wants. That's the nature of professional sport. But I found that really interesting because married up against the man, because he's such a principled and moral sort of arbiter of everyone else in his world, in both sport and his own private life. It's hard for the two to marry up. So that's where I just found him really complex, and that's why
is that why you do? Because I was going to say, Lee Sales told us that Wayne Bennett's A Strange Story to this day is one of the number ones. Like one of the biggest episodes to go out on the ABC. Don't Die with the Music, and you might have been the first rugby league book anyone read. Wayne Bennett's autobiography, ghostwritten, or maybe what do you call it?
It was more sort of part motivational one.
Yeah, right.
Really, yeah. But The Man in the Mirror was the last one he did in 2008.
Yeah.
And that was more the autobiography with it. But the whole reason why...
Yeah, that's what I want to ask. What do you think you have here that tells the story of Wayne? Like, I mean, obviously it's not Wayne telling the story. That's a big part of it.
That's the thing. And I think Wayne's been very good at creating his own narrative about himself, as we all do. But I just found, because of his stature, because of everything he's done since that last book in 2008, and like there's so much more to his story since, And I'd actually talked to Wayne about doing this years ago, of a book where I talked to all these different people in his life and enemies, allies, everybody, really, that's been touched by him. So I would have interviewed over 200 people for this book.
I want to know what a sworn enemy of Wayne Bennett looks like. I mean, I'm reading the book now. I'm really enjoying it, but no one actually says if they are.
No, they all dance around a little bit.
They're too scared.
But I don't think they'd be. Yeah, a lot of people spoke off the record, but people like Wally Lewis and Gordon Tallis, Mal Meninga as well. They
butt heads.
They were all very They were all very raw and honest about the times they've been let down by Wayne Bennett.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so but there are certainly sworn enemies.
Those are some big Queensland names you just rattled off.
Exactly. There's certainly some sworn enemies that were diplomatic in what they said publicly, but privately they'll tell you other things, you know. One sworn enemy is definitely Nick Politis from the Roosters, who gets out the one wood midway through the book about the time in 2006 when Wayne was coming, and then he didn't and reneged on the deal.
I'm glad he did.
So Nick the Godfather, he's a sworn enemy who went pretty hard.
And went public with it. I kind of want to talk about that. Does Wayne burn people because he's feeding the wrong wolf? He gets out of control of what he's doing with this career and this man.
Yeah,
that
for sure.
Yeah,
I think he's very like all the very good coaches. They'll do whatever they can to win.
Yeah.
And I found it really funny when Wayne said, "I'll never do anything unethical," even though he doctored up a tip sheet for about St George in the '93 Grand Final, and he'll take some underhanded methods, but doesn't think anything underhanded about it.
Yeah.
So I certainly think he believes his own bullshit in many regards.
Yeah.
But that's what makes him so fascinating.
How did you get him? Because from what I've heard, he keeps his cards very close to his chest. He doesn't like talking to press. How did you get him to not only talk to you, but even talk about the intimate details of the marriage breakdown? What was your secret?
I was just very upfront with him. He's very smart, Wayne. So when this is my 8th book. Yeah. Some I've written, some I've ghostwritten, some I haven't. The last few books I wrote, I just didn't have control over them when you ghostwrite them. So this one, I really wanted to be in control of the whole project. And as soon as I did the deal, I called him, and I called him on a Friday afternoon, and he didn't get back to me. He just went straight to voicemail, and then he called back about 10 o'clock that Friday night. I was a few schooners in, decided not to take it. I thought, you know what, probably not the right time to.
See him walk by. See, he's used to young blokes answering, pretending they're not at pubs.
Exactly. What? Sorry, I'm on the train, coach. So I texted him at 6 o'clock the next morning and said, "Sorry, I only heard your message. Can we talk now? Can we talk sometime today?" Yeah. And he texted back straight away, "Now." I went, and I said, "Look, I'm going to write a book about you." And he said, "Well, how can you do that without someone's permission?" And I said, "I don't have to, but look, it's going to be fair and balanced, raw and honest, but, it's not going to be a hatchet job. I think it's a well-researched and well-interviewed biography. So I just wanted you to hear it from me instead of the rugby league grapevine." And then he went dead quiet. And he has these legendary pregnant pauses, Wayne, where he puts all the heat back on the person on the other end of the line. And then he said, "Well, look, if you're going to do it, then I want it to be done properly. I'll give you whatever you want."
Right.
So, and from that moment on, I just wondered whether he was trying to manipulate me. He has all these generations of footballers, whether he's doing it to me. So, but he was very good, Wayne. I got to give him credit, and there was no area the only thing that he was very sensitive about was his relationship breakdown with his wife Trish and his new relationship with his partner Dale.
Yeah.
So that was the sensitive area. That's the one part he didn't want me to go into. But as I explained to him, I said, "Mate, I can't just pick, certain parts of your private life when it's so wrapped up in the person and the coach that you are, and ignore that as well."
Yeah.
So that was a tricky balance.
The average Queenslander is obviously, aside from all of the silverware that Wayne Bennett has provided us, are drawn to the man. He could have had half the win rate he had, and we would still kind of, been drawn to him. I think that was because he always looked like he was no nonsense. He always looked like, the media thing. He wouldn't talk to the media. He'd give one-word answers.
Yep.
He'd crush journalists with a stare, and we always, resented the shit stirring as well in rugby league media. Obviously, you resent that, the gotcha questions and that kind of stuff. He could handball all of them. Looking back, it looks like, everyone was thinking at that time, particularly at the height of the Broncos, Wayne Bennett's not here for this. He's here to coach. But I guess what you're saying here is That's part of it too. What he's doing there in front of the media there is not. It's not him not being interested. It's him playing a game right now that's going to directly result and affect what's happening on the field.
I think early on there it was out of necessity. Like he explains in great detail, and so does his brother Bob, about how not insecure, just he's shy.
Yeah.
He's a shy guy. Grew up in a small town, outside of Warwick, in southeast Queensland.
A small town outside a small town.
Yeah, that's it. Like he came from nothing, but he's in his words, he's introverted, and he found it very hard speaking publicly. Now I copped that. I said to him, I'll cop that to a point.
Yeah.
But I think in time he certainly worked out how to use the media, and he's become an expert at that. But I think he also loved the persona.
Yeah, that's the mystique, doesn't it?
He loved the Clint
Eastwood. That's what it was.
Persona.
Yeah.
Although he compared himself more to Kevin Costner in what's the Stan show?
Yellowstone.
Yellowstone. He thinks he's. He thinks he's more. People could compare him to Costner.
Yeah.
I saw a good
I'm sure it would take both.
Reddit comment that someone's like he's like Clint Eastwood's character in Gran Torino.
Yeah.
He's very much Gran Torino.
Because and we can get into all of that too. His ability to understand cultural nuances, which is very Gran Torino. There's the story of the young Asian boy and the old factory worker for old-fashioned kind of Chicago, white elderly man. Wayne Bennett has that. He has that, and he was the first to understand how to coach Polynesian players. He was the first to get the best out of Polynesian players in ways that couldn't, and we saw it happen with the Rabbitohs in 2000 with Farlago. It was a blow up between the coach and the player that lasted years.
Yes.
And it came out at a post-season event. Jason Taylor.
Forrester's Hotel.
Yeah.
I've seen the footage.
I've seen the
footage.
He went body surfing down the stairs.
He did the crane from Karate Kid, and Dave Farlago went whack whack, and JT went down the stairs and then got sacked.
And then that Patrick Skeen talks about this in Olsen Filipana's book. When we've had that first wave of Polynesian talent in the NRL, a lot of it kind of came through in the Super League war when there was heaps of teams to fill and people weren't being guided by prejudices, and we just kind of had to fill the team with fast young players, and that's when the Polynesian guys started coming through. The old school coach would yell at athletes. They'd treat Polynesian players the same way they treat their own kids or their own sons, which would be, look at me when I'm talking to you, which doesn't work. It's not a cultural... you can't do... And Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander footballers are the same. It's a sign of disrespect in their culture, in many cultures in the South Pacific, to be looking at the person who's reprimanding you. Whereas, in the Australian white bread kind of Aussie culture, it's a sign of respect to it. But, when you can't get that right, you've lost a player at the start.
Wayne's, I reckon, one of the major factors behind his success is that he can treat all these different players in different ways and
customised.
But also not seem like he's giving preferential treatment to others ahead of the rest of the group.
Yeah.
And he's just he plays on that being so much older than the rest of them. Like I think when he was at South, he used to walk into the gym there and said, "Turn this $1.50 shit off."
Yeah.
But knowing that he was stuffing it up, but they all loved him for it. Like he played up to it.
Yeah.
And that's the genius of him. He just knows exactly what to say and when and at what time after a loss or a win that's why he's won 7 premierships.
He was in the Queensland police force, right? Do you reckon that would have helped him, especially reining in rowdy boys?
I think it helped him. He came from his Uncle Eddie Brosnan was a famous footballer and policeman, and I think he always just wanted to be like his uncle. So that's why he went into the police force. It's funny, he said the thing, but he hated it. He hated the death knocks and he hated the the terrible things that police officers see. But he did like the fact that you could lock up protesters. Uni students in the 70s.
Yeah.
He said that was
there's photos, actually.
That was the upshot of it.
Yeah, I've seen there's a photo of him locking up a guy dressed as a clown. I can't remember.
I didn't see that one.
Yeah, it's somewhere.
But it's funny, there's great mugshots of him from his service record, and he looks exactly the same, but just less hair.
Yeah.
He hasn't aged.
I find the funny thing is what you've been able to do is get little snippets of whatever popular culture Wayne Bennett has ingested. I mean, to think that he's even up to date with Yellowstone is
I know.
hilarious.
He loves it. He loves it.
But then also the song that he obviously thinks about a lot is Waylon Jennings' "Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys."
Unbelievable.
And he
said it's all in the song.
Yeah,
it's all in the song, and it's like, what?
Let them be doctors and lawyers and such. Yeah. You don't get to see much of him. But I remember in the pandemic we saw a little bit of him, and it was almost mafioso. You know, a little bit like of who he is off the clock.
Yeah.
When they got caught down at the Grappa restaurant in Leichhardt, you know, outside of the bubble, and he couldn't coach the Rabbitohs for a couple of weeks because they had this COVID bubble where you weren't allowed to be outside of your team. And
Okay, yeah.
Established by an NRL sort of subcommittee on which he was on. So he's breaking the. He said, I said, I don't know the rules. Like, Wayne, you're on the committee that made up the rules.
And then all of a sudden I was like, I know he doesn't drink, I know he doesn't swear, I know he doesn't gamble. But he does these long lunches with these old friends at these dodgy old restaurants in dodgy old suburbs, and he kind of lives that life that no one ever thought he did. You know, no one thought he really enjoyed the fruits of, you know, a big long lunch.
He loves it. He loves a long lunch. He loves a long lunch with journos. Yeah, certain select journos, so he can plant the seeds of what he wants out there. But Alan Langer told me a great story about just how he loves. What did he say? He gets drunk on the atmosphere of the conversation. So he'll always be at the bar after a game drinking water, or he'll be there with them late in the night, or he loves going to lunch with all these old players and they'll be into the beers, but he'll get drunk intoxicated on the conversation, you know.
And that's when you get all the secrets. If you're the only sober person and everyone's drunk, that can be very fun as well.
Exactly.
I won't reveal Bob Catter's secrets, but he does. People think he's drinking booze a lot of the time and he isn't.
Oh, that's disturbing.
Yeah. White milk and Beanley rum.
That's foul.
Yeah. Still looks the same without rum in it. You
There you go. That old trick.
So he does. Do you think he's a bit of a gossip girl?
I know. I've dealt with Wayne for a while. He is an old gossip. He loves a chat. Like, I wrote it in the book. Like, there'd be times there where he just, for someone who like said, "Oh, I don't really give a shit whether people, you know, what they think of me, but I'll help you with the book." And then, you know, 2 days later, I was thinking you should put this in there.
Yeah.
But then he loves chatting about what's going on down there in Sydney. Who's doing this? Who's doing what?
Yeah.
You know, he loves the game.
He got a bit of FOMO too.
He would have a bit of FOMO. Yeah.
We saw him kind of really dig his heels in and look after his players at the Rabbitohs, which he's done throughout his whole career. But there were certain things happening in the media cycle that really, you know, pushed him over the edge, particularly with Latrell Mitchell. One of his own players that he's comforting in the sheds after a loss is crying, and, you know, the media turns that into a kind of a sideshow.
Yeah, sure.
And he spits the dummy. Do you think there's people he truly resents in the media? Do you think there's people that he's blacklisted, just won't deal with because of what they've done by him or his players?
I think so, yeah, there are. But I think Wayne's savvy enough to know that it's a long game.
Yeah, right.
You know, and the journos that he, or even people throughout the game that he's, you know, dismissed and given life to, he'll come back to if he needs them. You know, he's done that many times. But there's lots of... He's very good at being the buffer between his players and the public and the scrutiny and the press. And I've seen him do that many times there. He's a genius of deflection.
Yeah.
You know, it's an old tactic from, you know, Alex Ferguson when he was at Manchester United. It happens in many other sports. But he's very, very good at making, if Souths have lost by 40 points, he'll come out and start whinging about the referee or saying something about another journo or the other team, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, look over there. Well, we start talking about that. We'll ignore the fact that you've just been lapped by Penrith.
Yeah.
You know,
he put 30 points on you.
And it happens so often, but it just keeps happening over and over again. And other coaches try to do it, and it's like, mate, you're not Bennett.
Yeah, Ricky,
you know?
Ricky does.
Ricky's very good at it.
Yeah.
Although I think Ricky's just that's his.
Do you think that's honest? He's just
I know
his
Ricky.
temper after
I know
match?
Ricky very well. Yeah, I just think he's a cranky man.
Right.
Good fun, but a cranky man.
You write in your book, you kind of dedicate the book to rugby league, which you say always keeps your heart and notepad full.
Yes.
Can you tell us about the beginning of this romance? You know, where were you? Were you in Coffs Harbour growing up? Where were you?
I grew up just south of Coffs Harbour, a little town called Urunga.
Yep.
And I was born. It's like a death sentence into St George supporter.
Yeah, because your old man got to see them win. Your old man got to see them win.
And it's like, exactly, that time, in the olden days, I had no choice. And I just loved the game. And I came from a family of brickies, and my dad was just determined for me not to, you know, work as hard as he did.
Yep.
And I love riding, and I love league, and it was, you know, becoming a sports journalist was perfect way to marry the two together. I read a book by Adrian McGregor on Wally Lewis in 1987, King Wally. It was
Back when they thought he was going to run for Labor.
That's right. Yeah, that's it. But I remember reading that book and thinking, God, I'd love to do that for a living. I'd love to, cover rugby league for a living. Yeah, tell those stories. And then a few years later, I went to the 91 Grand Final, Penrith and Canberra.
Yep.
So I didn't have any skin in the result. But I remember walking up. It was a fantastic game, walking back through the crowd after the game, right past the press box. I went, that's what I want to do. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Were you of the cadetship era, or you went and studied?
I did. I know I studied and then did. So I did 4 years at Newcastle Uni.
Yep.
And then in my final year, I worked full time doing my cadetship at the Maitland Mercury in the Hunter Valley.
Still around, isn't it? The
Still
old
around,
Mercury?
not in paper form, sadly. But that was a great grounding. I got to cover so many different sports. Used to work my ass off every day. Far more than I do these days.
Did you find as a sports journo in the bush, towns have different sports? You know, in Australia, there's occasionally a hockey town. That's what they live and breathe.
Lacrosse. That's strong in lacrosse. Lots of netball stories.
Yeah.
I was going through the archives of the Mercury a few years ago, and there's like a back page, and I got Edna King, the pairs winner of the Newcastle District pairs. That was our back page story. Yeah, but I loved it. I've still mates with a lot of people from those days.
Maitland days.
Yeah, it's because you're just covering the sport.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, politically everyone.
Yeah, you were not touching about.
Yeah, you're not blowing up councils there. Everyone likes you.
No, they were good days.
So, rugby league has obviously been something that you've worked on a lot of things in a lot of places, but this has been something like a golden thread in your career, I guess. It's, as we said at the start of this interview, it's hard to ignore this game, this institution that Australia's definitely made their own. Whether it came with the British soldiers during, whenever. How it got here, where it came from is regardless, because it's got this mutation that's very much an Australian thing now, particularly North and East Australia. Other sports aren't like this. In soccer in Australia, we've had our fair share of people go in the EPL and become household names. Rugby, we've had a golden era there, and AFL obviously chugs along. Those sports don't have this eccentric flair that rugby league does. They have the same scandals. Young blokes get rich and famous too quick, and this is what happens.
Yes.
Why do you think? I mean, even Wayne Bennett in himself is like this stoic stalwart of the game. Is a little bit weird. You know what I mean? He's a little bit funny and a little bit bizarre, and you see that even with the players, the shit they get up to. Sometimes all you can do is laugh.
I've been covering the game for honestly, it's like. But like what you guys do, it's almost like art imitating life. It's like it's hilarious because it's just you couldn't script it. You couldn't make any of it up.
No.
If you could have told me in this, heading into the second week of the NRL finals, that the story of the day would be Val Holmes posting something on Instagram with a bag of white powder.
Oh yes.
And if it is Sydney cocaine, it would definitely be just white powder. But it's like.
The only people who can clarify what that is were with him, and they're saying it was white powder.
Exactly, the white powder scandal. Yeah. Only rugby league can do that over and over, but it gets on to spite itself. That's what cracks me up about the game. People going, "Oh, this is the mums, the dads, the children. People aren't going to be following it. They're not going to let their kids play it." Bullshit.
Yeah.
Because it's still going to be it's still the game of the masses.
Yeah.
In two little states.
Yeah. No.
In this corner of the world.
It's a funny one. You go. It just keeps chugging along, and people say that now with like concussions and those conversations. And obviously, it's a conversation that we could have been having a lot earlier, but we're having this conversation. And I was talking to some people the other day, and they was kind of saying, "Oh, I guess where the game could end up is it's just a game for kids trying to get out of low socioeconomic areas and desperate families, and they're not listening to the." I don't think that'll be the case. I think kids will keep playing. I mean, people know the best way to avoid getting concussions or concussion trauma is to not play. People are still going to play. It's a sense of community in a town, and the demographics might be changing alongside Australia's kind of Australian demographics, but I think we're still going to have a well-rounded inclusion in the communities that play rugby league. Everyone's going to be playing it, and it's not going to stop anytime soon.
And more women are playing it. It's the biggest growth area of the game.
Well, they're getting paid to play. That's the difference
That
too.
helps, yeah. But it is. But
Definitely
like the
helps.
participation of women's rugby leagues
Yeah.
through the roof, far
Yeah.
more than men.
Yeah.
Far more than males.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's why there's so much investment into it.
Wow.
I did not realise it.
Do you watch it? I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
the
I love
NRLW, I almost prefer it to the NRL.
Yeah.
Because it's what rugby league used to be about.
Why do you think it's
It's been
getting?
belting each other, not wrestling each other.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's getting more popular with women?
I'm not entirely sure. I think women's football in all those different, whether it's rugby, soccer, AFL, whatever. I think there's a groundswell of participation in it for whatever reason. I remember I covered the women's sevens at the Rio Olympics when they won gold there, and I thought, this is going to be. You just felt in the stands that day, this is going to be the start of a new sport that's going to explode in this country. And rugby never, in typical rugby fashion, never took advantage of it. And I think a lot of those athletes went to league. Yeah, but I do. It's funny. I've been hearing about the death of rugby league for 30 years, and it never happens. But I think what people sort of forget. There's a prominent player who I won't name, but I'll never forget. He was a player that was always troubled and always had, very brilliant on the field, but troubled off it. Always had off-field dramas, and he used to feign injury a lot.
Yeah.
And I said, "What's going on with this guy?" To the CEO of the club, and he said, "Mate, from the age of about 8, that kid has feigned injury in junior football games." And I said, "Why is that?" And he said, "Because his alcoholic parents, that's the only reason why they'd show interest in him.
Yeah.
If he was actually injured on the field."
Yeah.
So I think people sort of forget where a lot of these
Yeah.
players come from. So when they stuff up off the field,
Yeah. I mean, that's,
there's,
I said the same thing with the bubbler, right? The bubbler.
of all,
Do you remember the photo of the bubbler?
with Todd
Bubbler?
Carney.
Todd Carney peed in his own mouth.
Of all the dumb things Todd
Yes,
Carney's
I've
done,
heard
the
of
thing that
that.
got him ended his career
Yeah.
was pretending to piss in his mouth.
But
Oh, so he's pretending he didn't.
It
Yeah.
was. It was an illusion.
Oh, okay, like the
But-
white powder.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
right.
do you think people forget in circumstances like that? And that was I've spoken. Was it Rioli? What was his manager? At the
David
time?
Riolo,
David
yeah.
Riolo. I spoke to him about it, and he said that we were on a family holiday that ended the moment that photo went on social media. But he says, but people tend to forget that these kids grew up in leagues clubs. I mean, how old was Todd Carney when he first saw someone do that little funny party trick?
Not many people have been banned from his hometown like he has from.
Yeah, I know. And from the hometown's a great
That's
guy.
not a good one. I mean, even I see Mitchell Pearce announced his retirement via Instagram, obviously, yesterday. I was thinking back to that amazing time when he had simulated sex with a poodle cross.
Yeah.
And then turned up and played the next game after he got suspended, and then came back in his return game. There was someone in the stands holding a photo with a poodle cross saying, "Mitchell, it's Bella, call me." You're not getting that in any other code, are you?
And then,
There's the
I
beauty
think
of
that's
rugby
great
league.
fun. I think that's so much fun.
Yeah.
then they found out who the bloke was that filmed it and leaked it to the media, and then all of the Roosters
That's
fans
right.
got onto his business Instagram page. It's a soap opera that you get to wade into every week.
And you've got to when you're in my role, you can either take the piss out of it, or just ignore it.
Yeah.
So I take the piss.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people take it too seriously, and if you can just accept rugby league for what it is, it makes it so much easier.
As someone who's been in the country towns where or covered the stories at a grassroots level, as you said before, there's the kids with the alcoholic parents who switch on when their son looks like he's not going to be able to play football this weekend.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? And does that kind of inform your reporting? I know it's a big part of Wayne Bennett's story. Everyone's heard about him having a pretty bleak kind of childhood, with the booze and the whatever else was going on in the granite belt of Queensland in the 1950s. I can't imagine it was all too inspiring for anyone out there. Do you keep that in mind? Is that something you've got to keep in mind?
What do you mean in terms of their background or where they've come
you
from?
could be dealing with kids who have got full-blown PTSD.
100%.
Yeah.
I do. I do. I try and, you know what, not early on. You sort of sit there and you're trying to make a name for yourself as well. You go hard. And then,
you're a young bloke too, yeah.
Exactly. And you think, I've never made those mistakes, so why are you? But then you get a bit older and you understand the world a bit better and realise that people come from all different backgrounds. So, I try not to judge. But if someone does something ridiculous and someone does something serious, bizarre, then if it's bizarre, take the piss. If it's serious, then be a bit critical.
Yeah.
That's there's my journalism philosophy.
Yeah, because we also forget that amongst all of these poor little boys that, come from all these poor little towns and end up making millions of dollars. There's also an ego. We're talking about what this book kind of touches on. With Wayne Bennett, it manifests itself in different ways, but with the footballers, often we see a sense of entitlement, and that's what really pisses off the public.
It does.
Yeah.
But I always think, God, if you threw 800,000 at me a year when I was 21 or 22.
Yeah, what do they expect?
You become bulletproof.
I'd stuff it up more than anybody. Like I get it. I think I blame more the clubs, the managers, the coaches. They're the ones that need to.
Who's got the best infrastructure for the ticking time bomb that is a 18-year-old with $1 million in his pocket?
In terms of a club,
yeah.
Ooh, you know what? It changes. But I know they hate each other. But the Roosters and Souths are very good.
Yeah.
With all that in terms of like support from a real young age. The Broncos too, Penrith. You can tell. Tell. It's sort of the difference between the clubs now is a good club and a strong club and one that's battling is usually that type of staff, the support around their players.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if there is a drama, then they'll stamp it out and deal with it really quickly.
Can you name anyone else who has this kind of mythology around them in the game? I would think, obviously no one, you've written a book about Wayne Bennett because he can't be doubled. Like he won't be, there'll be nothing like that ever again that we see in this game, especially just with, as we said, 900 first grade games. But there are a few figures, even if they're even rugby league adjacent, they kind of have this immortality to them. We saw what's happened with Paul Kent has proven that no one is above the sword. No. But Ray Hadley or Peter V'landys, you have these kind of complicated figures that the public love and absolutely loathe at the same time. What is it like in the landscape that you have to live in? Are there people that you have to actually kiss the ring, or do you have to?
Not me, brother.
No, yeah.
I'm lucky. I'm beyond all that now.
Yeah.
You do when you're reporting that you've got to. You've got to rely on having strong relationships with people like Peter V'landys. I don't really want them to like me or even, think that they could drop me a story, but I'd rather they respect me. So I've been pretty hard on V'landys over the last 2 or 3 years because no one else has been really. But he rolls with that. We have our ups and downs, but that's the job. So, and same with Bolts, same with Ray, who I'm getting on with this week.
It's just so much more complicated than I thought. There's no people that are genuinely. It's all functional rivalries and functional kind of.
It's ruthless.
Yeah.
It's a ruthless. I remember a CEO said to me years ago, said, "Mate, this game is so ruthless, and people intimidate." Now, the late Bob Fulton, I remember when I was a young journo, called me out of the blue one day and he said, "What's your agenda?" I went, I don't know. Stories.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks that there's an agenda behind what you write or how you act or what you do, and it's like it's not. Sometimes it's just not that complicated.
I've got an old mate called Brian Barry, who's turning 100 next year.
Oh wow!
And he was an old referee in the New South Wales.
Is that the one we met?
He
He's
came through.
very charming.
We got to
very
introduce him
man.
to Nico Hines the other day, but he was a referee, and he tells a story about basically the Manly Mafia when there was a game out west, Magpies versus Manly, and it went down to the bell and Manly lost, and Manly thought that he stuffed it up, which it sounds like they were just sour grapes, and so the name you mentioned before meddled, and he ended up the next week being bumped down to a third grade touchy at Brookvale.
That sounds like the game I love and know.
The referee had to stand on the sideline in front of the fans the next weekend for a full match. You just forget that, and it's spiteful. It's
spiteful agendas, conspiracy, hate. Anger.
No, what I've
abuse.
gotten from working in this office and being around, you guys who love the NRL, is that there's so much gossip. There's just gossip all the time.
Always. If you only knew the half of it.
And does it, what I was getting at before with those V'landys and Hadley figures who kind of enter, folklore outside of sport in many aspects, does this world, in Queensland and New South Wales and Canberra, does this add to your CV, having some sort of involvement in a game that people love? Like, do people end up doing well in the corporate world like they would in soccer or in England and that kind of stuff?
A little bit. Like a lot of the CEOs now, like say Blake Solly at South, have worked in the Premier League or worked overseas.
Yeah.
So they've. I always find it funny though when someone from the corporate world comes into rugby league. Like the NRL, a few times have had corporate media managers who have come from government or there was a guy who actually was the Peter Grimshaw, who was Barry O'Farrell's media advisor when he was premier, and then he came over to rugby league and he said, "Mate, Macquarie Street's got nothing on this game at all."
I was thinking it was supposed to make sense.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not meant to make sense.
He said there's nothing at all, like in terms of the duplicity of people and the Machiavellian way they go about things. He said it's nothing on Macquarie Street. Which doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. So back in the day, if you were in the New South Wales Police Force or the Queensland Police Force, you'd shoot through the ranks if you were a handy footballer.
Absolutely.
Are people like that still thriving in, outside of the game, or is it you kind of need to stay close to the game?
I think you need to stay close to the game. Like it is. It's still at the end of the day, it is still allegedly a professional sport. So you get by on your merits a lot. But those clubs that have really professionalised, like the Roosters, Souths,
Storm has.
The Storm, for sure. They're all, and the Broncos. If that's the only way you're going to survive, really. Meanwhile, the poor old Dragons are languishing down there, living off, what they get off the leagues clubs, trying to do their best.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you think there's a few clubs that if we, say if New South Wales, Chris Minns went and banned poker machines tomorrow, which clubs would die?
That's a very loaded question. I don't know. It's funny. Like clubs like the Tigers, you look at the West Tigers. The thing I remember, one of the I won't say the name of the official of the West Tigers who said it. Said, "Why do you want us sacked?" I said, "I don't want you sacked." I said, "You guys are great fun." But commercially, that's the thing with the Tigers. They make heaps of money.
They do.
They just can't win many games.
Where do they make the money? Campbelltown.
I think commercially, I think they've managed to drag in plenty of sponsorship.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So they're well supported.
Yeah.
West Ashfield's
Trigger
Monday Taj Mahal.
Trigger Bob's got a bit of philanthropy.
He's got a little bit of money there too. Yeah, but just can't win any games.
What's another yarn you want to tell? I mean,
from the Bennett ball?
No, just in terms in this game. What's another kind of ornament that you think needs to be skewered? I mean, you probably don't. You don't have to tell us because you've probably got competitors out there or rivals out there, but. There's people telling yarns in this game, and you've proven obviously that you can get the access for someone like Wayne Bennett and get that story told.
I suppose the thing that always interests me, this isn't so much a yarn, but I think it says a lot about the game that the thing that it always fascinates me that like you look at the Roosters and Souths, you got Nick Politis who's worth $2.2 billion.
Yeah.
That's what according to BRW, or according to the Fin these days. And then you got Russell Crowe, who's won Oscars and worth, got more money than God,
and still punish themselves by
and get bent out of shape over the smallest of stories. Like I remember Nick called me once. This is years ago when Craig Fitzgibbon was getting pushed out the door because of salary cap, and I wrote that was the case. It was like a tiny little postage stamp of a story in the Herald when it was a big broadsheet, and he called me one day and he's like. Fuck you, I'm never fucking talking to you again, this is a joke, it's such a sensitive issue. I said, oi, Nick, I said, come on. I said, I wrote it really soft, I've written plenty of good stories about the Roosters, and he went, okay, it's okay, baby. I love you. It's a very sensitive issue. I could hear this water, and I said, lapping at his feet, and I said, where are you? And he said, I'm in Greece at the beach. I said, Nick, come on, let it go.
He was on holiday?
Yeah, like he'd flown over there in his private jet. And it's like, God, really, you've got nothing better to worry about than... Yeah. But that just shows you the passion for the game,
and it's funny, someone like Nick Politis is funny in that, there's something you could talk about that one little island off Greece where they all come out of the... Kithera with fucking Vlandis, Politis, MJ Chickens and Pappas.
They're all there, yeah.
But you do get these funny stories where you have kind of these, immigrant stories where, tell me about Politis. Was he in any way interested in the game before he decided to be the City Ford sponsor?
No,
So
not at all.
fell in love.
He was a soccer fan.
So he fell in love through a commercial decision.
Yeah, to try and make money out of the game, and then became so passionate about it, and he took over. And then they were battling throughout the 80s, and he took over his chair, and basically.
So that was when it happened, right?
In '93 he became chair.
You're right.
Yeah,
because he was the club sponsor, and he said, "I'm now emotionally invested in this."
So now I'm going to take control of it because I like to win.
Yeah. Do you think someone like Russell Crowe, when he did what he did with the Rabbitohs, and took the reins there? Do you think he expected it to be as difficult and Machiavellian as you said?
I didn't think he expected it to be a money bonfire that it did. I think he got sick of tipping in his own money. Yeah. But he's the same. He's so where else would you see where you got Russell Crowe, who gets his mate James Packer to buy into the club, and then gets Mike Cannon-Brooks to buy in as well. And there's not many places, not many games where that could,
and still be considered the pride of the league and the working man's team.
100%.
It's I do find that now there's a bit of sports washing, in a way that people wouldn't expect. But Cannon-Brooks buying into the Rabbitohs, walking around town with his beard and his bunny's hat on.
Double Bay Jesus.
He's keeping himself down to earth in a sense, especially when he's talking about climate change. He's talking about all these things that, would otherwise people would just tell him to shut up and he's an elite and la 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 la. But because he's got the Rabbitohs tick, do you think
he's got the Rabbitohs hat?
Yeah, he's got the hat.
That's all you need.
Yeah. Right.
One of the rare times he's been quoted in the last 12 months, he was after a game. He said to one of our journos, "We're South Sydney, mate. We dig in. We're tough." It's like, thanks for that, Mike. Thanks for that insight.
Thank you for seen your house.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. You're slumming it there in Double Bay.
Yeah. Well, what a great yarn. And the book is, as I said, I'm enjoying it quite a lot. And I'm learning a lot more. I've been played my whole life, I'm realising now, by this gentle, stoic, old, grandfatherly figure that was actually, puppeteering me as a member of the public, and as well as the media, and as well as the players and the opponents and opposing coaches. Wayne Bennett is a hell of a story and a complex one, and one with a lot of layers we're learning. And we've discussed a little bit of that today, but there's plenty more in there. Thank you for joining us, Andrew Webster.
Thanks so much for having me.